Parents abandoned my sick child. You won't believe what happened next. They say family is everything. That blood is thicker than water. I used to believe that too, until the day my parents looked me in the eye and told me that my sick child, their only grandchild, was not their responsibility. That moment, one I will never forget, shattered something inside me. It was the kind of pain that doesn't scream. It just stays, quietly haunting you in every moment of disappointment and every second of sacrifice that follows. You see, I had always been the obedient one, the one who followed the rules, who got the good grades, who went to medical school, who made them proud at every holiday dinner. I never rebelled, never got into trouble. And when I married young and had my son, my beautiful boy who would later be diagnosed with a rare autoimmune condition, I thought they would stand by me like I had always stood by them. But when he fell ill, and I needed help just for a few months to care for him while I kept my job, they told me coldly, "We raised our kids. We're not raising yours." No anger, no softness, just silence followed by that cruel line. And the worst part? That day, I was meant to fly to New York for the final round of interviews for my dream fellowship, something I had worked toward for 8 years. I asked them if they could please stay with my son, just for 48 hours. They said no. They said they had a vacation planned. So I stayed. I watched my opportunity slip away while holding my son's tiny hand through his fever, tears rolling down silently because I didn't want him to see me break. That was the day I stopped being their child and became my son's everything. And from that moment on, every single breath I took was for him. I started working nights. I took freelance consulting gigs, remote clinic calls, anything that would allow me to be near my son while keeping a roof over our heads. There were nights I didn't sleep at all, mornings when my hands trembled from exhaustion, but I kept going. Every time I looked at my son's face, pale but fighting, I remembered what mattered. I sold the car, downgraded our apartment, canceled everything non-essential. My friends stopped calling, social life disappeared, and all that was left was me, my son, and the weight of a world I once thought my parents would help carry. They never called to ask how he was doing, not even once. But strangely, that silence became my fuel. You see, when you hit bottom and no one is there to catch you, you start to build wings instead. I taught myself about rare disease advocacy. I started writing medical blogs at night, sharing our journey. Slowly, people started to notice. A single article I wrote about navigating healthcare with a sick child went viral. It reached the inbox of a nonprofit medical director. That led to a guest speaking event. That led to an offer to consult. Then another. Eventually, I founded my own patient support startup, designed specifically to help parents like me, left behind by the very people who were supposed to love them. Within 2 years, we were featured in national news. I was invited to speak at medical conferences, and one day, I got a call from that same institution in New York that once rejected me. They wanted me to lead a new initiative. This time, I didn't need the job. I was hiring them. I didn't accept the offer out of spite. I accepted it because it was poetic justice. I walked back into that prestigious hospital, not as a desperate applicant begging for a chance, but as a keynote speaker, an innovator, someone who had built something real from the ashes of abandonment. The irony was bitterly sweet. The same conference room that once held my rejection letter was now filled with applause for the work I'd done. They called me resilient. They called me a visionary. No one knew what it cost me to earn those titles. How many nights I cried quietly beside my son's hospital bed, hoping for just one miracle, one moment of relief. But what stunned me most happened 6 months later. My parents reached out, not with concern, not with apology, but with confusion. They had seen me on the news, heard my name on the radio. Their neighbors had started asking questions, and I suppose curiosity, or maybe even guilt, finally pushed them to call. My mother's voice was unsure, my father more silent than usual. They wanted to reconnect, to catch up, even though they never asked once about my son's health. Instead, they danced around the subject, asking what I'd been working on, pretending they hadn't cut me out completely when I needed them most. I listened quietly. Then she said it. My mother. She asked, "Why did you stop helping with our mortgage payments?" I sat there for a moment, stunned. That was the question? After everything? After I had lost everything and rebuilt it from the ground up? After being left to carry the weight of my son's illness alone? They wanted to know about money? I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I just responded with the calm that comes from surviving a storm alone. Because you weren't there when I needed you. You turned your backs on your sick grandson. I stopped paying because that relationship was already bankrupt. Silence. Dead silence. I could feel the shame crawl through the phone line like a fog. They tried to defend themselves, but nothing could erase what had already been done. My success wasn't theirs to share. My triumphs were built on pain they chose not to ease. And in that moment, I felt more powerful than I ever had before. After that call, I sat in my car for a long time, watching the sky dim into twilight. I should have felt vindicated, maybe even victorious, but all I felt was tired. Tired from years of carrying emotional weight no one else bothered to lift. I looked at my son, now sleeping peacefully in the back seat, unaware of the war his existence had ignited. And in that stillness, I realized that everything I'd fought for wasn't just about proving people wrong. It was about proving to myself that I could survive, even thrive, when every support beam I thought I had collapsed beneath me. I didn't need their approval. I had built a family on truth, not obligation, love, not guilt, and I would never let anyone compromise that again. In the months that followed, more opportunities came in. A publishing deal, an interview on a major morning show, collaborations with medical innovators. And every single one of those victories had my son's fingerprints on them. I brought him with me to events, introduced him not as my inspiration, but as my reason. He reminded me to stay humble, to stay grateful, and he reminded me that sometimes, the ones who are supposed to love you unconditionally are the very ones who will abandon you in your darkest hour. But that doesn't mean you stop loving yourself, or stop fighting, or stop dreaming. There was a point where I thought my life had ended, but really, it had only just begun. I started a scholarship in my son's name, one that helps single parents in medical school who are struggling the way I did. The letters I receive now echo my own pain and my own triumph. I read every one. I respond personally, because I know what it's like to scream into a void and hope someone, anyone, will listen. I want to be that someone. I want to be the hand that pulls people out of the dark. And every time someone writes me saying, "Your story gave me hope," I remember that my suffering wasn't wasted. It was the soil where I planted something new, something lasting. Eventually, word spread even further. My story became not just a tale of betrayal and heartbreak, but one of fierce resilience, quiet strength, and the relentless determination of a parent who refused to give up. I was invited to speak at conferences, to tell my journey not just as a survivor, but as someone who turned devastation into destiny. Each time I stood on a stage, I could feel the pulse of all the pain I had once buried rising to the surface, not to haunt me, but to heal others. And perhaps most poignantly, some of those who had walked away from me tried to return. My father sent a letter, 3 pages long, soaked in regret. He wrote about sleepless nights, about shame, about wishing he could go back and choose differently. But I never responded, because the person I had become no longer needed his apology to move forward. Forgiveness isn't always about letting someone back into your life. It's about freeing yourself from the weight of what they did. I forgave him quietly in my heart, then turned the page. My mother showed up one day at a bookstore signing, her eyes lined with tears, her hands trembling. She didn't say a word. She just watched as I spoke to a room full of strangers who now knew me better than my own family ever did. When our eyes met, I nodded, not out of invitation, but acknowledgement. She had missed her chance, and that wasn't cruelty. It was consequence. The world has a way of circling back, and when it does, you get to choose how you receive it. I chose peace, not reconciliation, just peace, because I had built a new life from the ashes they left behind. One filled with purpose, laughter, and most importantly, unshakable self-worth. That was something no apology could ever buy, and it was mine to keep. In time, I learned that true strength doesn't come from revenge or proving people wrong. It comes from choosing yourself every single day, even when the world tries to make you feel like you're not enough. I didn't need to shout my success from the rooftops. I didn't need to flaunt the money I had earned, the lives I was changing, or the love I had finally found. My life spoke louder than any words could. And in the quiet moments, when the house was still and my child asleep, I would sit by the window, sip tea, and smile. Not because everything was perfect, but because I had survived what was meant to break me. I had become a version of myself that even I didn't know I was capable of being. Stronger, kinder, wiser, and utterly untouchable by the opinions or rejections of those who once turned their backs on me. I had learned to find joy in small things. The way my child laughed, the way the sun hit the pages of a book I was reading, the softness of a blanket after a long day. These were the things that mattered. These were the anchors that held me steady. And though scars remained, they were no longer a source of pain. They were proof that I had endured, evolved, and emerged whole. In the end, the job I lost, the family who failed me, and the dreams that were momentarily delayed, all of it had been necessary. Necessary for me to become who I am, to build a life not out of obligation or fear, but out of fierce, unrelenting love, for myself, for my child, and for the future I refuse to give up on. Looking back, I understand now that not everyone is meant to walk with you forever. Some people come into your life to teach you lessons. Lessons in resilience, self-respect, boundaries, and sometimes in letting go. My parents? They taught me that blood doesn't always mean loyalty, that sometimes your chosen family, the people who show up for you, who believe in you when you're down, who offer their last when you have none, matter more than any biological tie. My past employers? They showed me that institutions will always put their bottom line first. But they also taught me how to value my worth and never again allow myself to be disposable. And the struggle, the nights I wept silently while holding my sick child, the months I juggled unpaid bills, the rejections, the loneliness, it all carved into me a depth of empathy I never would have had otherwise. Today, I help others not just with advice, but with understanding. Because I've been there. I know what it feels like to be unseen, to be unheard, to be told, directly or indirectly, that you don't matter. But I also know what it feels like to rise, to reclaim your dignity, to find purpose in the ashes. And maybe that's why people come to me now, not just for what I've built, but for who I've become in the process. Someone who listens, who cares, who gets it. And if there's one thing I hope you take from my story, it's this. Your darkest moments do not define you. Your response to them does. You can rise. You will rise. Because you, like me, are stronger than you've ever been told. And if you're still in the storm, if you're waking up each day wondering how you'll make it to the next, I want to speak directly to your heart. You are not broken. You are being refined. The pain you're carrying, it's valid. Don't let anyone minimize it. But also don't let it consume you. There's a version of you on the other side of this that is wiser, stronger, and more compassionate than you've ever imagined. I remember nights when my son would sleep in my arms, and I'd whisper promises into the darkness, promises that I'd never let him feel as unwanted as I once did, promises that I'd build something that would make him proud. And slowly, those promises became the foundation of the life I live now. Not because someone saved me, but because I chose not to give up. Because I refused to let bitterness win. Forgiveness didn't come easy. There were times I wanted to scream at my parents, to demand they explain how they could turn away when I needed them most. But I realized something crucial. Forgiveness wasn't about them. It was about freeing myself. I didn't want to carry the weight of their failures anymore. I didn't want to build a future based on the wreckage they left behind. So I forgave, not because they deserved it, but because I did. And in that space, something beautiful grew. A life built on truth, on love, on resilience, on purpose. Now, years later, I look back not with anger, but with clarity. My journey wasn't clean or easy. It was messy, painful, and full of doubt, but it was mine. Every time I got knocked down, I chose to stand again, not just for me, but for my child. And that changed everything. I built my business brick by brick, not just to prove something to those who doubted me, but to create a safe, stable world for us. It wasn't about revenge. It was about redemption. And something incredible started happening. The people who once dismissed me, who said I couldn't do it, started to take notice. Some reached out, trying to reconnect. Others offered apologies, some sincere, some clearly driven by guilt or convenience. My parents were among them. They asked to meet. When I sat down with them, they didn't know what to expect. Maybe they thought I'd be bitter, angry, cold. But what they saw was a man at peace. A man who had moved beyond their rejection. And I told them the truth. Calmly. Honestly. I told them that I had needed them once, and they weren't there. I told them how that absence shaped me. How it forced me to become someone who could survive alone. They cried. And for the first time, I saw something in them I hadn't seen before. Regret. Deep, soul-level regret. It didn't fix what had been broken, but it acknowledged it. And that mattered. As we sat there, the weight of everything hung in the air. My parents had missed so much. The long nights when I had to console my sick child, the hours spent at doctors' offices, the moments I doubted myself and questioned whether I was doing enough. They missed my struggles, but they also missed my victories. And when they asked how I could forgive them, I simply said, I had to. I told them forgiveness wasn't about them. It was about me. It was about moving on, letting go of the anger that had kept me from reaching my full potential. By holding on to that bitterness, I had chained myself to the past. The moment I let go of it, I became free. And with that freedom came success, both in my career and in my personal life. My child, though still struggling, was no longer the burden I feared they would be. They were my motivation, my reason for working harder, for building something bigger than myself. And then, the unexpected happened. My parents, who had once turned their backs on me, now wanted to be a part of my life. They wanted to be involved with their grandchild. They wanted to help. They wanted to make up for lost time. And as hard as it was, I couldn't turn them away. Because in the end, it wasn't about holding grudges. It was about building a future where my child could see that no matter how rough the road had been, there was always a way forward, even if it meant making peace with the past. As my success continued to grow, I couldn't help but feel a strange sense of validation. The struggles I had faced, the rejection, and the sacrifices I had made, Everything was beginning to pay off. But with success came the inevitable encounters with people who had once turned their backs on me. My parents, who had dismissed me when I needed them the most, now came crawling back. It wasn't easy for me to face them again. I had spent years building a life where their absence had, in many ways, shaped who I had become. I had learned to be self-reliant, to thrive on my own terms. But their sudden reappearance, after everything that had happened, stirred up a whirlwind of emotions I wasn't prepared for. They reached out to me through messages, calls, and even showed up at my door one evening. The words they spoke were full of remorse. They apologized for abandoning me and my child, for pushing me away when I was at my lowest. They told me how proud they were of what I had accomplished, and how much they regretted their actions. In their voices, I heard the tone of regret and longing, but I also heard a tinge of desperation. It was clear that they hadn't just come to apologize. They were hoping to be a part of the life I had built. But I couldn't ignore the bitterness that lingered. How could I just forgive and forget everything they had put me through? I knew they were trying to reconnect because of my success, and part of me wanted to let go of the anger. After all, I had achieved everything on my own, and my child and I had come so far. But another part of me, the part that had been hurt so deeply by their actions, struggled to open up to them again. There was a moment when they asked for my help in a way that felt genuine, that I realized I had the power to choose how I responded. I didn't have to forgive them right away, but I didn't have to carry the weight of their abandonment either. I was in a position of strength, something I had never imagined possible. I told them I needed time to process everything, to heal in my own way. I didn't give them immediate access to my life, but I also didn't shut them out completely. I wanted to take control of the narrative, not just for them, but for myself. I knew that forgiving them didn't mean forgetting or erasing the past. It meant I was no longer letting their actions define me. In the months that followed, I continued to focus on my business and my child. I made sure to nurture the relationships that truly mattered, the ones built on mutual respect, love, and trust. My life was no longer about proving anything to anyone. It was about creating a future where I could finally breathe easy, where I was no longer defined by the hurt of the past. And when I finally did face my parents again, it was on my terms. I had learned to embrace forgiveness, not for their sake, but for mine. It was a hard, emotional journey, but in the end, I realized that success wasn't just about wealth or recognition. It was about finding peace within myself and learning to live life on my own terms.